Fire. We speak of it often and in so many ways. Now, of course, I'm speaking of fire in the context of church. We hear, that message was fire. Let the fire of God fall. But what does the Bible say? Let's learn a bit. Turn to Luke 12:49. And you'll find there it says, I am come to send fire on the earth, and what will I, if it be already kindled? And so this is Jesus speaking, and he says, I am come to send fire on the earth. Now, the rest of that passage, there's more to it. He talks about causing division. He says, I'm not come to give peace on earth, I tell you, but rather to cause division. It's a passage there of about 5 or 6 verses that people really debate back and forth. What was he talking about? He's supposed to be God of peace, and here he's not saying that. And so you have to understand a little bit of what he's referring to kind of metaphorically in order to really understand it. And I am not going to try and spend a bunch of time on that per se, but I want to look at, in context, I want to look at this word fire, and also want to look at how that pertains to our series, Tending the Altar. So fire in the Bible, typically, the Bible, when it says the word fire, uses a translation that literally means to like lightning fall, or a flash of lightning, or a fire that's like lightning, or just, truly a sudden fire or fire happening. And that's true of the Old Testament, and it's true of the New Testament, that's typically the word. When we see fire, that's what it is. And so we can't read too much into the word fire. In other words, we can't get lost in here fire means this and here fire means that. Although fire can have interpretations that will be different within their context. And one of the places where fire is sometimes a different word is when it's referring to sacrifices, the sacrificial fire, if you will. And that's different. And then it doesn't just refer to like lightning or fire or fiery. There it is talking about a consuming fire that burns something up. And it's within context of that, it's talking about the fire of God, the sacrifice is consumed up and consumed for God's purpose. All right. So, you'll sometimes see the word there actually double translated. So it's literally the word fire. And then it also has this consuming aspect of it. And so I want to pause for just a second and say that, when we're talking about sacrifice, we're talking about bringing something to God, which is going to be offered to God, given to God, consumed by fire by God. And that's just different than just the plain old word fire. Okay? So subtle differences there, but just understand that there is a consuming sacrificial fire. And then there's a refiner's fire, and that is found that is found in Malachi 3:2-3. And it says there, but who may abide the day of his coming, and who shall stand when he appeareth? For he is like a refiner's fire, and like fuller's soap. And he shall sit as a refiner and purifier of silver, and he shall purify the sons of Levi, and purge them as gold and silver, that they may offer unto the Lord on an offering in righteousness. So this is talking about a refiner's fire that brings about the ability to offer unto God an offering that is righteous. So that's almost a blending of the two words. In other words, it's the idea of the fire, but it's also the idea of the consuming fire that kind of brought together. So offerings, of righteousness. There we go. Voice is working again. Offerings of righteousness, that ability to bring that offering before God. And it's talking about the refiner's fire. And, there's the story, it made way around the internet a couple of years ago of the refiner who's he refines the silver and he sits there and he heats it all up and it burns away the dross and stuff and he looks at it, and when he can see his reflection in the silver, that's when he knows that it's good. And of course the story goes that that's like Christ in the refiner's fire, and that when he sees the reflection of himself in us, then that's when we've been brought to that point of righteousness. And it's a great story. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. I just want you to, I'm aware of it and it's out there. But the reality is the refiner's fire is a consuming fire. It consumes the dross. It consumes the dross, the things that are not pure, until they comes to that point of purification. And that's the idea of the sacrifice, is that we sacrifice, we give to God, and it for that is where we get our righteousness, etc. And that is a picture of Christ, who died for us, and in dying for us paid our debt, and we are white or purified or washed clean, or however you want to refer to it. Our sin is taken away. We're without a blemish when in light of the sacrifice that he made. Okay? So, typical fire, the sacrificial fire, the refiner's fire. And again, this is not a study on fire, but it is a study in relationship to tending the altar. Okay? So, I said when we started this series, are you present or tending? Are you one who is going to pay attention to, apply oneself to, act as an attendant, serve, listen, await, apply yourself to the care of, watch over, be responsible to tend the altar? That's the priest's job in tending the altar. And we are all to be priests in the sense that, we minister through our testimony, through our word. It's not everyone is a licensed minister or what have you. Not everyone's called in that particular way, but we all are called to share the good news. We are all called to witness and tell our story, if you will, of what Jesus has done for us. And we all should strive to be ready to tend the altar. Not just say, I'm present, I'm here, but to actually do something. And so we talked about the priests have three main responsibilities: to assist in accessing God, in teaching, and also seeking out the will of God on a large scale, or national or corporate type scale. So Jesus was our atonement, a sacrificial process that we looked at in the Old Testament, the fire, and we've talked about tending the altar. And so today, within this lesson, I want to ask you this. We started out again and we asked the question, are you present or are you tending? So now we've talked about this for some 20 weeks. I want to ask you this. Are you tending or pretending? See, in Luke 12:49, our key verse today, it says, I am come to send fire on the earth. And I just want to pause right there for a minute and talk about that. Now, some would suggest that Christ is speaking about the destruction of the temple in the future, or that he may be predicting, because he goes on and talks about causing division, and 5 in the same house will be 3 against 2, and that sort of thing. He may be talking about being unequally yoked together, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And so there's some different ideas there, but I want you to start with just that first phrase, and let's take a look at that. I am come to send fire on the earth. Now, in the Old Testament in particular, often you had earthen altars. We're earth. We're earth. I am come to send fire on the earth. What's the purpose of the fire? Consume the sacrifice. What's the purpose of the fire? To refine what's being presented. It's not a stretch to say that if the altar is an earthen altar and that there's fire on the altar, that's a picture of where we're supposed to be in our relationship with God. If we're supposed to be tending the altar, if we're supposed to be tending the altar, if we're supposed to be tending the altar and tending the fire within the altar, he's come to send the fire to the altar. He's come to touch the fire to the earth. That's a refining process. We all like the warm, fuzzy feelings, right? We love it when the presence of God is there and you can kind of bask in that presence. We all like it when, the music is good, the word feels good, and you go home from church and you just feel good. And there's nothing wrong with that. But there's also nothing wrong with the word kind of hurts a little bit. The word bites a little bit because you realize that, I've come short. I haven't let the fire touch my altar. And in fact, in this verse, he goes on and says, and what will I if it be already kindled? In other words, he's saying, so what if I come to send fire to the earth and it's already been touched? That's okay. But if not, that's what he's come to do. And it talks about, it goes on and says, but I have a baptism to be baptized with, and am I straight until it be accomplished? Suppose ye that I come to give peace on earth? I tell you no, but rather division. And then he says, from henceforth there shall be 5 in one house, divided 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. The father divided against the son, and the son against the father, the mother against the daughter, daughter against the mother-in-law against her daughter-in-law, the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And he said also to the people, when you see a cloud rise out of the west straightway, you say, there cometh a shower, and it is so. And then he goes on and talks about the times in which they're living and not being aware of the times. We're aware of the weather, but we don't know what time it is that we live. And of course, there's much discussion about these being the last days. So we need to pay attention to that. But I think what Jesus is saying here when he says, I'm come to send fire on the earth, first and foremost, he's talking about fire on the altar of our heart. And then when he talks about the division that's created, that division comes when flesh has to meet spiritual, when flesh has to meet righteousness. And there is a refinement that takes place. There is a burning off of the dross in our lives that contaminates in our life, the sin in our life. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Not a question about that. We need to let his fire come down and touch our earth. Now, the priest at the fire, well, if you're at the altar and you're tending the fire, you are near the fire. And it's been said that if you're near God, you're near the fire. This is why people go through a transformation that sometimes is hard for their friends to understand, where things that they used to enjoy, they no longer enjoy, but they have different things that interest them today from what they were before, because they've gotten closer to the fire. As they've gotten closer to the fire, those things that aren't of God, those things that aren't of righteousness, begin to burn away. My dad used to say, people say, you can't do this and you can't do that and you can't do this other thing over here when you're a Christian. And he said, I can do anything I want to. But God changed my want tos. And that's really truth. Maybe I used to be the party animal and go and, drink and party, and then I got saved and I don't want to do those things anymore. Instead, I want to go to church and I want to worship God. And, my friends from that time frame when I was a partier, they're like, what is going on with you? Well, in simple terms, God changed my want to, but in more context of what we're talking about, I've gotten closer to the fire, and so some of that stuff started to burn away. What's important now is not what was important before, because I'm in a closer relationship with the fire. And, the other thing, as a priest working the altar, part of what they did was preparing the sacrifice. And that goes to leading people to Christ. That goes to helping people access God. Preparing the sacrifice, helping those understand, helping them reach that place where they too can become closer to the fire, that the fire can touch the altar, their earthen altar of their life. That's part of what's going on. It's that point where we come before the fire, the refiner's fire kind of cleans us up, but we are able to then offer a righteous offering. Why? Because Christ has taken care of it. He's cleaned it up. And then it becomes an all-consuming fire. It takes the sacrifice. God, I give you my life. Right? I give you my life that you could use it as you see fit. God, I am here in service to you because of what you've done for me. My life has been touched by your fire. My altar's been touched by your fire. And like I said, he goes on, he talks about the division. Well, what about division? We all want to have this place where we all get along, and then we have this verse saying that he causes division. He said, well, that contradicts itself, doesn't make any sense. But I think it does make sense. And I think it makes sense maybe in a way you haven't really wrapped your brain around yet. He says that one of the signs is that we love one another. Well, how can you have division if you love one another? And again, what I think he's talking about is unequally yoked. The Bible talks about not being unequally yoked, pulling together, but not an equal, you're not going to be successful in getting where you're trying to go. And I think it goes back to this idea of the house. He talks about a house divided against itself cannot stand. I think what he's talking about here is getting our flesh subject to the fire of God. I think what he's talking about is that we're going to be in division until we get close enough to the fire that God can clean those things up. Until we get to that place where he can sanctify and purify and make our offering righteous. The sooner we invite the fire to the altar of our life, the sooner he can start to clean things up. And he's an all-consuming fire. He's a refining fire. He's a fire that can touch the earth. If you have enough heat, you can take sand and make glass. Take something that's gritty and make it smooth. You can take something that you can't see through and you can make it clear. And so the reality is that when we allow God to touch our lives, it changes everything. When we allow him to do what he said he was going to do, I am come to send fire on earth. When we allow that to happen, then our sacrifice can be complete. Then we can stand before the refiner and have our sacrifice be righteous. So in looking at the lesson this week, and we asked that question, are you tending or pretending? What's your motivation? Where are we in our relationship to God? Am I doing all the right things and saying all the right things because I've learned how to talk, I've learned how to act? Or am I really letting God reach down and touch my earth? Am I really tending the fire at the altar there? Am I really standing near the fire? Or is it smoke and mirrors, so to speak? Am I doing something that looks good, but it's not really what's in my heart It's not really what's in my altar. It's not really what's in my earth. That's the question we have to ask ourselves. And it may make us a little bit uncomfortable to confront that. It may make us a little bit uncomfortable to try and look at, what is God saying to me? I think we live in a day and a time, and he talks about that here too, but we live in a day and a time when we don't have room for games. We don't have room to play church. We don't have room to pretend like everything's okay when it's not. We don't have room to hang on to our little pet sins. Well, we don't call them sins, but our little pet habits. We don't have time to play around with what God says I'm not supposed to play around with. We need to get serious before God and let him purify our lives. Let him purify our life so that we can be in a position where God can use us. I say that a lot, and sometimes I think people, wonder, well, why would I want to do that? Why can't I just sit in a pew or a chair? I guess we don't really use pews too much anymore. Why can't I just sit in a chair and feel good about life? Why do I have to do more than that? But see, if God's touched your life, if God's touched your want tos, you want to please him. You want to help others access God. You want to help prepare the sacrifice so they can come to God as well. You reach that place where you want to do more and you want to help other people. I mean, I think that's one of the most amazing things is when we find something that works, we can kind of become obnoxious with it. I found this drain cleaner and it really cleans the drains, And so you tell everybody, you need to buy this drain cleaner, because it really works. And they say, I'm having trouble with my dishwasher spotting. And, oh, you know what? You probably have a clogged up drain. You could get some drain cleaner and fix that right up. We're ready. We want to tell them all about our favorite drain cleaner. And yet we have people who wander around and they're like zombies. Their life is so screwed up. And we're afraid to say anything because we don't want them to think we're a freak. Or we don't want to think it's all just, all you ever say is, you need Jesus. Well, guess what? All you need is Jesus. All you need is to get close to that fire. The one who came to touch the earth with the fire. That's what you need. You need God. You need God to have peace. But it says right here, he didn't come to send peace. He came to cause division, right? To separate the sinful nature from God and have you come in line with God. In other words, to destroy, consume the fire, consume the sin. We're coming to a place where we need to be in a relationship with him to have peace. We need to be in a relationship with him to have really our very next breath. We need to be in a relationship with God in these days, in these times. If you're in a relationship with God, are you going to have problems? Yes. Are there going to be days when it seems horrible? Yes. But who are you going to trust? Who are you going to rely on? Are you going to be lost in worry and doubt and fear, or are you going to be at peace because you know that you're letting his fire touch your earth? You know that you're consumed by him. He's all consuming, and you can give it all to him. Every last bit. You don't have to worry about hiding a sin, over here under the rug where he doesn't see it or whatever, because he will see it. You just give it all to him. He'll take care of it. I think one of the things my wife likes about room service at hotels is that they come in and they clean the room, make the bed and do all that stuff. You don't have to do anything. Well, here's your life. You've managed to screw it all up. Isn't it great if you can just ask God to come in and take care of it? He comes in and cleans all the stuff out of life for you, and all you got to do is keep coming back to him and saying, hey, you know what, I kind of messed this stuff up. God, here it is. Not try and hide it and think, feel guilty. Oh, what if God finds out I did this? God already knows. Give it to him. Let his fire touch your earth. Let his fire be at your altar. And as you begin to grow in that, be the one that helps tend the altar. So again, we can stop pretending and we can start tending the altar of our life. We can start letting the fire be there at the altar. We can let it consume the sacrifice. We can let it refine and take care of the things that are not of God in our life. That is tending the altar. That is allowing the fire of God to touch your life. That is the key to everything else that you want to see happen. We say there's fire falling and miracles are happening. You know what? The first, biggest, greatest miracle is just giving it all to God and say, God, I need you. I need you to be Savior. I need you to be Lord of my life. And keep going back to that point where we say, God, send your fire, touch my earth, make me clean again. That heart attitude, that approach to God will open up the door for everything else that you want to see happen. The greatest miracle is salvation. And the greatest reason that God does other miracles is so we can bring people to a point of salvation. So we can bring people to a place where they recognize that God really is. And he really is my Savior. That's what we need to reach for. All-consuming fire, you're my heart's desire. Give it all to him. Let his fire fall on your altar. It doesn't matter what you think your sacrifice is. He'll clean it up and take care of it. Remember Elijah on Mount Carmel when he had the little showdown, and he got his chance after they couldn't get a fire. He got his chance, and he wet everything down. He did all kinds of stuff to make it impossible. But when he called, fire came down and consumed everything. It consumed the water. It consumed the sacrifice. It consumed the entire thing. Why? Because that's who God is. He is perfect as a fire. He is perfect as a Savior. He is perfect as a Lord. And we just need to take and give it all to him on the altar and let his fire come consume everything at our earthen altar. And when we do that, God's gonna move. And that's really what it boils down to. God's gonna move in your life. You're not gonna have a life without problems, but you're gonna have a life where your problems can be cast upon him. And he can give you peace, and he can give you rest. And he can do that because he cares for you. That's what his word says. And that's it for this week.